Slenderman stalked my little gas station town by Dead Pallet. My childhood was very unenviable because of where I grew up. It was so isolated that I rarely got to hang out with anyone outside of school. But at around 11 years old, my older cousin came into my life and I finally had someone to talk to. Yet, around the same time, a tall, faceless man in a suit started disturbing my small town. Then, I could no longer hang out with my cousin because my parents couldn't be sure he wasn't the one starting the trouble. I grew up in a little hamlet in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, right off of a highway. We had 2 gas stations, 6 fast food restaurants, and a single motel for truckers. 250 residents, of which I was the only child, and an endless sea of woods. Of the 2 gas stations, one had a built-in truck stop, and the other one, the small, almost hidden one, was owned by my parents. It was also across the street from our single-story ranch-style house. Right behind the house were some woods that went back a good 10 miles. This was the domain of me and my imaginary friends. Now, I don't know what imaginary friends mean to other people, but I knew they weren't real. They were partially the product of wild kid imagination and partially the product of complete and total social isolation. Either way, it worried both my parents, but in different ways. My mother, angry with my father for keeping us in the boonies where I was going stir-crazy, and my father, angry with me for being a loser that talks to himself. Still, I talked to my imaginary friends in my father's company, simply out of comfort. It was a crummy situation for me. Busing to school was 40 minutes each way. Many of the children lived closer to the actual school than me. Neither of my parents had much time to drive me to other kids' houses, and their parents didn't want to drive their kids to me. Playdates were rare things for me. Pretty much the only time I got to visit classmates was when they'd have a birthday party. My parents thought that was important, so I'd often beg my classmates to throw birthday parties even if they didn't care to have one. To them, it was a cake and a present. No biggie. To me, it was freedom and a rest from the monotony of the woods and its imaginary inhabitants. Very mercifully, I did have a Nintendo 64 which helped pass a lot of time, but I was limited to a handful of games. The best being both of its Zelda games, the worst being Glover. Still, since I only had 6 games for the console for years and years, I had seen everything there was to see in that terrible game. We didn't have a normal department store, just Clarion's, our local general store. Heck, I didn't know game stores were a thing until I was like 15. For whatever reason, cartoons and TV never stuck with me, the exception being pro wrestling. So, my only interests, the rebellious wrestling of the 90s and video games, were things my parents wanted to limit, thinking they were unhealthy for a developing mind. It was a harsh reality for me then. Summer was something all my classmates clamored for. Not me, of course. It was a 3-month hot and humid solitary confinement. But at 11 years old, just as I was about to be stuck in the harsh reality of gas station town life, my then 19-year-old cousin came to work for the summer. Greg was a punk that refused to go to college and couldn't hold a job. It was so cool. Knowing my dad could beat him if he didn't do his job but wouldn't fire him, his dad sent him to work at our little struggling gas station, and my parents needed the help. It was just them and one other part-timer. He moved into a tiny little guest room we had next to mine. Both rooms had windows with a view of the woods just beyond. Quickly, he established himself as an absolute madman by smoking in his room with the window open. And oftentimes that's how we'd talk, leaning out the windows and chatting while he smoked cigarettes. He wasn't your typical 90s grunge-style punk, by the way. He was an all-black, tight jeans, Clash anti-authoritarian punk pulled right out of the 70s. It was straight wild seeing something like that with how sheltered I was. Despite working a lot at the gas station, Greg made tons of time for me. As dysfunctional as his home life was elsewhere, he knew mine was worse. Little did I know how bad it was. I didn't know any different. So, he showed me a bunch of cool stuff. How to make a fire out of just sticks and branches deep in the woods, reading Harry Potter books to me for hours on end, even had to skip rocks in the creek a few miles into the forest. That was some arcane magic right there. And you know it wouldn't be the 90s in a redneck area if an 11-year-old wasn't given a pocket knife by a trusted adult. Still, I had to hide that from my parents. They wouldn't approve. Unfortunately for me, my fun came to an end one weekend. Greg was away for a weekend adventure with his punk friends, scheduled to return late Sunday for a bright and early Monday shift. His friends came and picked him up, and I got to see the mold he came from. 3 friends in a car with the same deal going on. I could survive a weekend alone no problem. I've lived alone for way longer. But he wouldn't return at all. Sad story, but he got caught smoking the devil's grass. In an instant, my parents decided he could never return. Not to the job and not as my friend. They didn't want me to lead a life of evil, smoking bluebies and rolling dunts and huffing spliffers. No, it was way healthier for me to be isolated from kids my age for 3 entire months. To this day, I wonder if my mind couldn't handle that news and it just broke then and there. It was either the night of the news breaking or very soon after that I heard a staticky fuzz around midnight. Waking up wasn't rare because of the extreme heat, but it was oddly cold in my room. I got up and looked out my window. The grass had a light frost on it. It was less green than normal in the sparse moonlight, almost black. The sound seemed to be coming from out there, in my woods. It was almost a hum. It called to me. It called to me so deeply. And so, I picked up my flashlight and went to investigate. I carefully lifted my window and crawled out barefoot. It was indeed very chilly, but the stiff cold grass felt good between my toes. As I made my way into the tree line, my vision didn't widen. My eyes didn't adjust. I swear there was a fine line between where moonlight gently splashed on the forest ground and a wall of darkness obscuring the rest of the woodlands. I entered further to see what was making that hypnotic sound and turned on my flashlight. I came upon a tree that I knew well, right next to where Greg taught me to build a fire. I could have sworn it was further in. I knew it was because we wanted to be far from the house to do it. But there I was. And the tree had a piece of white paper on it with a black drawing. It depicted what I think were trees, like 5 or 6 of them. But looking closer, I realized one of the trees had 3 trunks. Focusing, I realized it was probably just a rough-looking drawing of a man. After looking and looking, I lost myself in the scribbles, my brow furrowing while gazing up with my head tilting down. A sound increased around me, the fuzz as I called it getting louder and louder. A shiver from the cold ran down my spine and my thoughts broke free of the drawing. Suddenly, I realized just how unlike me it was to escape into the night like this. So I, now afraid of the night and scared of getting in trouble, ran back to the house. I ran and ran. It was, in fact, very far from the house. The fuzz sound was behind me, present, but lessening with distance between me and Greg's fireplace. But my fears were confirmed. When I arrived back to my house, the lights were on and my parents were freaking out. Trauma-wise, I blocked out a lot of that night. I was no stranger to getting whipped, but whatever happened left a big bruise on my face. And to be expected, Greg was blamed. Stuck indoors, grounded from the outside in video games, my perception of time eroded even further. I would have preferred actual adult jail, because at least I'd have someone to talk to. One evening, as had been happening more and more, my parents got into a fight over something. It was probably about money or selling the store and the land behind our house. My mom wanted to sell, and my dad didn't like the price being pitched around. The land was uneven and wouldn't fetch a good price, being almost hidden from the highway. It was a long-term investment worth little money to the realtors. Anyway, I was looking out my window, dreaming of talking to my imaginary friends out there. It was literally like I was grounded from my non-existent friends. After all, they hung out in the woods. I couldn't sneak out if I wanted to either. My dad nailed the window shut in 4 places. And then, I heard the sound again. The fuzzy sound. Soon, he came to. That was the first time I saw him. The tall man without a face. I wasn't sure what sparked that idea in my head. The pirates and ninja and wrestler friends made sense. So why did my mind produce this thing? And why did I actually see it, unlike pretending to see it? The man wandered forward, his arms outstretched. They were long, insanely so, reaching out to me like I was a caged dog, longing for affection. In some ways, I was afraid, but not how you might think. Not afraid like one is afraid of a person pointing a gun at you. Less so of danger and more so afraid like going on a roller coaster for the first time. Afraid, but excited. If not for the nails in the window, I know I'd have gone out to him. I might have even been trying to pull at the nails to no avail. Even still, the fuzz got louder and louder as he approached. He exited the tree line entirely, his black suit no longer obscured by the canopy of the forest. Something about the clarity of him at that point, still sauntering closer, told me he wasn't a creation of my mind. He was something that the forest owned, or he owned it. He was now close enough to almost touch my window with his lengthy arms, the noise now blistering my eardrums. I jumped so much when I heard a plate shatter behind me. My father had thrown a dinner plate, dinner and all, at my mother. Turning back around, the man outside my window was gone, and so was the sound. I don't think I left my room that night. I probably locked my door. Another evening, like many at that time, blurred and mixed together, I was inside my room, trying to entertain myself with nothing but a 12x10 Zelda poster and the nature outside my window. The fuzz came around. I wonder now if it was reprogramming me in some way, or mind-controlling me. I can't be certain of anything around that time, but I looked under my bed and saw my father's hammer from the garage. I can't tell you how it got there, but I do remember using it to pull out the nails in my window. Wandering in the woods and exploring was harder with my dad taking my flashlight from me. I passed the trees into the depths of the forest, unable to see anything 5 feet beyond me, simply relying on the increasing sound of the fuzz, leading me to the tall man. I wasn't foolish enough to not know where I was going, but I was ignorant enough to not know why. I could feel his presence like his hand was reaching out to me, just out of my view. Each tree I came upon was like him, of him. The sound changing and getting louder, my vision getting just slightly wider, afraid and needing to see him. And then all at once, I stopped. Motionless, there he was, just out of my cone of vision, impossibly tall with a face as white as the moon. If not for the fact it was so dark now that I couldn't see my feet, I'd have sworn it was just the moon and the night playing tricks on me. Breathing deeply, I noticed all sounds had subsided, just me and him. At daybreak, I woke up colder than I'd ever been in my entire life. I couldn't even close my fist. I hobbled back towards the house, unable to feel my feet, but my shins hurt so bad. I think I might have been dehydrated or malnourished. Despite all that, there was calm in me. I was anxious, but calm in a way. The forest I knew so well was different this early in the twilight hours. It was serene. Until I heard a sound. It was kind of like the fuzz at first, but I recognized it eventually. Fire. My house had been on fire. The gas station, too. I scrambled to the gravel driveway, the rocks hurting my now throbbing feet. My mom crumbled seeing me. She fell to her knees hugging me, crying and hugging me so tightly. She thought I had died locked in my room. My father was missing. He was never found, and it was suggested by my mother that he started the fire. But at the same time, I also knew how to start a fire, and my mom was done with the situation she was in. I'm not sure of anything, really, but what I can tell you for certain is that once she knew I was safe, she wasn't torn up about Dad. No insurance money came due to the fire, which was fine all the same. We went to live with Greg's family. He became a big part of my life. I know that's a lot of stuff to take in, but it does feel good to get it out there. So, y'all can think I'm crazy, But I'll tell you this. It feels nice to have people to talk to now. Slenderman Stalked My Little Gas Station Town was written by Dead Palette. Narration by Abysme. Editing, mastering, and original music by Abysme. Comprehensive links below. YouTube.com/Creepypasta is a collaborative channel. Please subscribe if you want to follow our content. If you want to support the channel, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing this video with like-minded members of the community.